I'm Cooper.
I'm Addison.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Natalie.
So Natalie, what is the difference between animal rights and animal welfare?
So the difference between animal rights and animal welfare is that animals don't actually have rights except for being property for humans. So the way that we protect animals' welfare and their well-being is by establishing the theory known in veterinary practice as that animal welfare is about animals have interests, but if the human benefit, say for research, surpasses those interests, we can justify the sacrifice of those interests. So the first protection that came about, the first legal protection, was the Animal Welfare Act passed in 1966, which covers all warm-blooded animals, live or dead cats, dogs, guinea pigs, rabbits, non-human primates, and that leaves out reptiles and laboratory mice and rats. So how do we establish their welfare? So that's where the guide comes in, which was originally written and continued to be written by NRC. And NRC establishes Brambles' 5 freedoms amongst a whole bunch of other really specific regulations for those laboratory animals. So between the AWA and the guide, there's a whole bunch of different organizations and institutions that enforce that legally for our animals, either in research labs, pets, exhibitions, and even breeders.
Chris, why should we choose you over another student?
So there are multiple reasons why I think I'd be a very good fit for vet school. The first being is my location and where I'm from. I am in the eastern part of North Carolina, and where I'm from, we only have small animal vets. My goal is to become a mixed practice vet, both working with large and small animals. And the reason why this is because I realized where I'm from, my closest large animal vet is an hour and a half away. I want to be the person that can be in my local county and be the person that people come to with questions for large animals. Because an hour and a half drive can be life or death between a horse, a goat, a sheep, a cow. The second reason for me wanting to become a mixed practice vet is because we have a shortage of mixed practice vets in not only the state, but the U.S. in total. I want to be the person that can fill that void and be a person that can increase the amount of people coming into the veterinarian community. I will be able to work with more people than just a small animal vet or just a large animal vet, and hopefully that will influence other people to become a veterinarian. The last reason is because I always had an interest with large animals, and I feel like it'd be a good reason for me to be able to work with them. And where I'm from, I can work with the shackle for ponies and run research on them. If there's an animal that needs help in the shackle for ponies, I can go out there, work with them, or have them brought somewhere where I can administer any kind of surgery that's needed. This will give me the opportunity to give back to my community and show them that I care about them and be the person there that we need. That's it.
Okay, Natalie, how do you define diversity and inclusion?
So I've been trying to define diversity and inclusion for myself since I was a little girl. So I grew up partially in Costa Rica with my Latino family, and I stayed there over the summers. And so I was basically adopted into this community as a friend, as a daughter, and eventually as a coworker. And so coming back to the United States every year, I would ask myself, am I Latina? Like, what is my identity? How do I relate to people? And so eventually coming to NC State, I figured out what identity means, and also what diversity means. So NC State is a predominantly white campus, but when I joined the Latin dance team Sube Ritmo here at NC State, I realized that the Latino community is really strong. It's just not always recognized. So there are a couple efforts on campus for inclusion, like La Cita and Mi Fams or Mi Familia. And these groups and clubs have been established here at NC State to work on inclusion, and inclusion is the student's responsibility. I understand that, the school itself works on diversity, which is, a variety of different backgrounds and identities, and that's important. Normally statistically, not very human touch there, but the human touch comes from the student body and how we relate to each other and how we can establish inclusion, which is, making sure that everybody has the right to being fairly represented and also the right to, the same opportunities and resources as other students. Thank you.
If you were to never get into vet school, what would you do?
So, if I would never get into vet school, my first thing that I would want to do is become a vet assistant. That way, I won't be working as a veterinarian, but I will be working with them. So that will still give me my my desire to work with animals. It will give me time to work with the public, and it will also give me an opportunity to be a person in my community that people can look to, whether they have questions or they need my opinion on something. If I end up not following that field, I've decided I want to go into either not animal nutrition, but animal product. So going out to farms, giving products, talking about different ways that certain products can work and benefit animals. Either that or I would like to teach. I was never one for thinking of being a teacher, but I have a roommate now she's almost a teacher right now. She's in her student teaching right now, and seeing how she can brighten people's day up by being there and giving them knowledge is something that I find a lot. And I do have a passion with animals, so if I could work animal science or some kind of agricultural teaching position at a local high school or another place in the state or in the U.S., that would be very fulfilling to me because I'm still getting that personal interaction, I'm still getting the community interaction, and I won't be working directly with animals, but that would still give me the opportunity to learn more about animals, giving my desire for knowledge. It would give me more time to spread my knowledge to other people, giving them more interest, and hopefully pushing them to a field that I personally might not be able to get into, but still give a person the chance to follow their dreams, to have the opportunity to create something new, create an innovation that can help not only their life, my life, but other people's lives around them. And that is a joy that I feel I would be greatly proud of if I could do that to another person.
Okay, so tell us about your study abroad experience and how that has influenced your growth as a pre-vet student.
So my study abroad experience took place last fall, 2019, and I went to the University of Copenhagen. So I'm studying neuroscience here at NC State. Really exciting field, very frontier. And one of the reasons why I chose Copenhagen was because they have a state-of-the-art facility and they're turning out some really fascinating research. So my thought was, okay, they've got these crazy facilities, really good equipment. I should be able to do something hands-on in terms of lab work that, I wouldn't be able to do it here at NC State. So I went to Copenhagen for neuroscience and I did learn a lot and it was amazing. But I went out of my comfort zone and I took an aquatic physiology class, and I've always adored aquariums since being, a little girl. And it's not part of my major, but I wanted to try it, and thank God I did, because I realized that while we were in lecture in the marine labs, in the classroom, and then also in the aquarium, there was medicine for the fish also taking place behind the scenes, which I got to witness in the marine lab. And we would work on, the research with the fish, so like hypoxic conditions, what kind of equipment does that entail? And then also we were teaching the public, which is a responsibility for veterinarians. And when we were in the aquarium and we were doing, lecture, my professor would explain to us, and sometimes some of the public would overhear and get excited, and we would answer their questions. So I realized, studying under these marine biologists and working in the marine lab, that I don't necessarily want to pursue marine biology through, a research lens, but maybe more so through a medicine. And so coming back to NC State after my study abroad, I realized that there's an incredible pre-veterinary program here, and I started talking to some professors, and aquatic medicine is very much a field as well as a career, and I've been very excited about pursuing that path since my study abroad experience.
Chris, what is your opinion on ear cropping and tail docking?
So ear cropping and tail docking, I understand, is a very controversial topic. For ear cropping, I do know that it's used a lot for markings, such as feral cats that have been spayed and neutered. Mostly we would often crop their ears, that way we know which animals have been neutered or spayed and which ones have not. For swine, they have portions of their ears that are cropped where it's for identification purposes, such as which breed they were from, or which litter they were from, which ones have been mated, and stuff like that. For parts of like identification, ear cropping I am perfectly fine with. That's just a way that we can use to identify. However, ear cropping in the aesthetic version, I'm not okay with that. I believe that it's almost inhumane because you want your Doberman to have more pointed ears. That's something that should not be pursued, because that's something that can stress an animal out. That's something that can negatively affect the animal. And you're also putting them through a treatment that has any risk of death in it. So why not have the opportunity to try and decrease that as much as possible by not putting it under just to have its ears more pointy. For tail docking, personally where I'm from, a lot of people do run dogs for hunting, and they will dock the tail. They do it for purposes such as they don't want sound to be done while they're hunting, but the bigger reason is because they don't want the tail to become injured. While they're running the dogs, there's a lot of briars, they'll hit against trees, and the dog can come back and the tail will be destroyed and need more medicine for it. So a lot of people will dock the tail, that way it's for safety and it's also for the animal's health. But personally I do not agree with it. That's, again, putting the animal under a not needed surgery that has a chance of death. It's also aesthetic. Like I said with ear cropping, it's the human wants it. It's not for the benefit of the dog. Partially it is, but you can put that dog out of that situation. It's something that I just don't agree with, because you're removing a portion of the animal's body that's actually quite needed. So in terms of docking, I don't agree with it. It's something that I see as unnecessary. Ear cropping for aesthetics, I don't agree with it, because it's aesthetic again. Ear cropping for identification, I do agree with that, because that's an easier way for you to identify an animal rather than a collar, a band, a microchip. It's an easier way to do that, but it's also more permanent. That's my opinion.
We forgot to ask one of my questions. I think it's okay. Okay, so Cooper, tell me about yourself.
Okay, so my name's Cooper. I grew up in a small town in North Carolina. Throughout my life, I was a big multi-sport athlete. I grew up playing baseball as my main sport. I took on basketball and cross country in middle school and then swimming in high school. My main sport, however, was baseball. I played since I was 4 years old, and I played that throughout all 4 years of high school as a varsity athlete. And then I was also involved in Boy Scouts throughout my middle school and high school career. I earned my Eagle Scout, which was the highest rank in scouting, and I did my Eagle Scout project at the Carolina Tiger Rescue to help build structures for the animals there. I worked with PD the Ocelot and built him 2 houses for him to, as shelter because his were falling down and stuff like that. Throughout high school, I was a member of NHS, which is National Honor Society, and the Spanish Honor Society, as well as I was on the Dream Team, which is a specific high school organization in North Carolina, which is all about athlete mentoring through reaching out through elementary and middle school. So I was able to mentor elementary through high school students. We had a peer mentoring program set up at the high school to help with just homework and stuff like that. And then we also walked across the street to our local elementary school for the county where we would mentor them in basic skills that, you know, they were learning to read. So we taught, you know, we were generally assigned one kid who was a little bit behind the rest to help them read or teach them math or whatever they really needed help with, as well as just to talk to them. And we did that before school every morning. So school generally started about 8:45, and we would get there at about 7 and work with them for about an hour before, because the elementary school started before. So I was really involved in that in high school. I love to build stuff, and my hobbies are like fishing and camping and being outdoors, really. I love going on adventures. We have a big land behind our property that is an old tree farm that doesn't really get used anymore, and me and my brothers would love to go and just explore that property and the creek that runs through it, and we love to go kayaking and all sorts of things like that. So being outdoors and being in adventures and stuff like that is kind of what I love to do. And then kind of all my life, though, throughout all of these experiences has always been, you know, I've always wanted to be into the veterinary field and working with animals. As part of that, working with wildlife mainly was something that I thought I wanted to do until I got my job on a farm where I really loved large animal.
All right. Addison, in your vet experience, what is the most difficult situation you faced, and how did you deal with it?
The most difficult situation I've faced so far is a little Yorkie that came into a vet's office when I was working there, and I was mainly in charge of her care as like one of the lower vet techs. And just seeing her, she was skin and bones, had kidney failure, and all she could do was curl in a ball and mess herself. And it was heartbreaking. And I wanted to do something so bad, and we all knew, but the owners were so attached to her and they loved her so much that they didn't want to let her go. And I still think about her, but a vet gave me the best advice. She's like, there's nothing you can do except talk them through it and hope they see. She's like, you can have your come to Jesus talk ready, where you tell them, I know you love this animal. I know you raised it, and all you want to do is hang on to it forever. She's like, but at this point, they're hurting a lot. And I think it's time that you let it go. It's going to hurt, but it's a part of life. And that's just kind of when I realized that there's limits to the care you can give, because in certain places, you can only do what the owner tells you to do. So we could not put down that animal, because it was the owner's decision, it's not mine. And I've come to accept that this is not my fault. So I can feel bad, and I still think about her, but it's something I can't control.
So Cooper, what role do you take in group projects, and what actions do you take when a group member isn't performing their duties?
Okay, so in group projects, I really try to get things going and be that person to take the first couple steps. That way, we don't kind of wait till the end to do stuff and then run into crunch time and have a subpar project or whatever it is for, if we're volunteering as a group, or if it's for a school project. I like to get things going, because in my experience, I've had difficulty waiting until the last minute to kind of start, and then we just run into all sorts of problems with that. So I like to get it going, and then only take on responsibilities that I know I can fulfill, and not take on too much. And sometimes in group projects, I've had to take a back seat because I've known that, you know, this week, I've got 4 games this week, and so I'm gonna be out at, you know, playing baseball or at a meet these days, so I'm not able to meet with the group, but I can take on the responsibility of making the bibliography or writing the introduction or whatever it is. So maybe I can't meet with the group, but I can still do as much as I can to contribute, and that way my responsibility for the group isn't falling through when I'm saying, oh yeah, I can meet, and then I end up running late at a game or something. And then also making sure that I take on responsibilities in the group that I know I can do and I have the skills to do, and not trying to say, oh, I can do it, when I know I'm not very good at writing this type of a paper or something, or I'm not very good with this skill. I try to make sure that I take on stuff that I know how to do. And so, but if I do find myself in that situation in a group project, I try to reach out for help, because I've been in a situation where someone didn't reach out for help, and then we didn't finish because they didn't know what they were doing. And instead of asking us for help, they waited till after to tell us that they didn't know what questions we're asking and stuff like that, and we could have helped with that. So that kind of ties into the second part of that question, which was, you know, what do you do if a group member isn't participating or helping? So in terms of school projects, when someone's not participating, it really impacts your grade, because you have that lack of you know, responsibility from those people, but you also have that lack of material that you're presenting in front of the class or in front of whoever you're presenting in front of. So it's very important to make sure everyone's carrying their weight. So in one situation, we had someone who had a history of not participating, and we knew this person had some trouble in the past with group work. So what we did with them, we started early, and we gave them specific tasks to do that we felt were reasonable, and we delegated to them, so that their responsibility wasn't gonna, you know, take down the whole group, but we didn't want to make it so that they didn't have to do anything, right? Just so that they weren't rewarded for this past history. So we gave them some good tasks that they could do and they could knock out, and we made sure that they had the skills to do this. And that really worked, because they felt like they had like a checklist that they could just go through and get done. And since we started early, we had plenty of time with this person. But I've also had experience where we had someone in our group who didn't carry the responsibility at all. And one thing that, looking back, so we had a group member who we kind of all had our work done, except for this one group member, and they told us they were going to do it Sunday night for the Monday presentation. And most of us had work to do, kind of editing work to do on our slides, and we had to practice what we were going to present. So we all had work to do Sunday night, but most of us had our slides filled up, but they still had 4 blank slides that they hadn't completed. So Monday, when we came in to present, there was still a couple blank slides that group member hadn't filled with their information that they were supposed to do. And when we talked to them about it, they used the excuse, however valid it was that they said, I didn't know what the questions were asking, and I didn't know how to answer them, which was something that we could have explained to them. We could have reworded the questions, and we could have, told them places to look if they had come to us. So looking back, something that we should have done was to talk to everyone and make sure that everyone knew the part that we kind of divvied up, even if they agreed to take on that responsibility of doing whatever part we decided each person should do. We should have made sure everyone understood the questions and kind of read through as a group each of the questions and discussed them. But also we should have seen that, Friday and Saturday, they still hadn't had anything on their slides, and we all had, lots of information gathered. We should have talked to them and asked them, hey, what's going on? that way they would have had a chance before the Monday presentation to go through and talk to us and really kind of understand and then get their work done and carry their weight. And in the end, we were able to work it out with the teacher to make sure that the rest of the group got credit for their work, and that person got an opportunity to kind of represent their portion, but the rest of the group was treated fairly in that the rest of the group carried their weight, and they weren't punished by that one kind of missing group member. But and looking back, we should have been a little bit more preemptive when choosing that.
Describe a difficult case and an uplifting case that you have worked, and how did you respond?
I've had lots of those working at the vet's office, but the few that have stuck with me, the difficult case was with Maggie. She was a little beagle, and I got a call from one of the vet techs to go in and take a temperature and just give her a look over and write anything down. And I walked in, and he told me she hadn't been eating, and he was worried, and I looked at her, and she had this big mammary tumor that was scraping the ground. Like, there was like burns where she had been rubbing against the ground, and it was bad. And I asked him, I was like, have you noticed this? Not being rude to him, maybe he didn't know. And I was like, have you noticed this? How long has this been there? And he's like, oh, Dad, it's nothing. So we went and got the vet, and she did confirm it was a mammary tumor, and we removed it. And it weighed about 3 pounds, because we were all curious, so we weighed it. And it's just, the owner also asked us to save her uterus, because he wanted to breed her for a 5th time. And it was difficult, because you have to follow the owner's orders. But in cases like this, she's very evident a breeder dog. And it's hard, because all you can do is report, do the paperwork, and turn it in, because you can't legally take someone's animal. You have to let someone with the certification to do it. And it was hard just to let Maggie go, but it came down to all I could do is make sure that she was loved and taken care of while I was there. And I was taking care of her, checking in on her, and just giving her the best care I could. But on the flip side, there are those uplifting cases that make you feel better about your day, and so not every day is going to be terrible. And this one kind of started off bad, but his name was Hades, and he was a little black lab pit mix. He was really cute, and he loved me. He had gotten hit by a car and broken 2 of his legs, and he would just sit there and teeter-totter on them, and it was really funny. But he would always make an effort to stand up if someone came to his kennel and come to the front and just kind of shove his way up there. And I was one of the vet techs in charge of changing his wrappings every day, because he was a puppy, and he would mess places and get them all in it, and that wasn't sanitary. So we had to change it, and I just looked after him. And it ended in the end, his owners left him because they couldn't afford the medical bills. And someone did come forward to pay them, and we tried calling them and telling them that they no longer needed to pay that $2,000, that they were cleared just to come pick him up, and they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't answer our calls, and if they did, they hung up. So we just ended up putting him up for adoption, and luckily, sadly though, while I wasn't there, he got adopted by the local pastor. And it was funny, they told me that he asked what his name was, and he said, Hades. And they're like, we're gonna have to change that, which we all thought was hilarious. But I was just happy that I was a part in this dog's journey, that he started off in kind of a bad area, but I took care of him and loved him and helped him get to somewhere where I know he'll be happy and be well taken care of for the rest of his life, like a dog should be. So it makes it worthwhile.
Okay, Cooper. So what types of large animal experience do you have?
Okay, so my large animal experience started about halfway through high school, where I started working on a farm in the town over from mine. And so on the farm they have about 100 head of cattle. It's a small operation with 100 head of cattle, and then a bunch of other typical farm animals, sheep and goats, ducks, chickens, horses, and some donkeys. So I was able to work with the farm vet, who was one of the owners as well as the farmer there. And the first few months of this job just kind of worked building up kind of a relationship with the farmer and the farm vet, because I had known them through my elementary and middle school years, as I had grown up with one of their sons, who were pretty close friends throughout those years. And that's kind of how I got the connection to the job, was I reached out, and because I knew that going into vet school was something I wanted to do, and large animal was one of my options. So I reached out to them, and they gave me the job. So the first kind of couple, month or so was kind of just building my relationship with them. So my experience with that came just mainly with chores, doing, feeding, watering, giving minerals, and rotating cattle and stuff like that. But then once kind of we had a pretty good relationship, the vet started letting me do more and more with her animals, and she even let me, give injections to them, which was a really unique experience, because at a lot of places they require you to be 18 or to have certain certifications or whatever. So it was really unique for me to be able to go work with these large animals and give injections and medications and stuff to get the experience. She let me inject cows that had certain issues. There was one particular case, which was my first one, that we had, one of our cattle had a big mass on its leg and it was limping, and one of the times when we were rotating cattle from pasture to pasture, we noticed its limp, so we had to separate it from the herd, bring it up, and the vet let me run the diagnostics on it, so it took the temperature and all that, and I had to, and she kind of figured, she did the diagnostics herself once, I reported them to her, and she kind of figured out what her diagnosis was, but then she didn't tell me that, she just kind of asked me what I thought, she told me different possibilities and what I thought might be wrong with the cow, and basically, and then once we had kind of diagnosed it, she allowed me to kind of design a treatment plan for the cow, which something that surprised me was we used pink eye medication for a mass on her leg, which I thought was really interesting, but it helps with the swelling and the temperature. So that was a unique thing that I wouldn't have thought of to use, and when I made my treatment plan for this cow, I didn't think of that. At first I didn't say, oh, pink eye medication for a leg issue, but that's what she used, and it worked effectively. We were on that medication for about a week and a half, and the swelling and everything went down on the leg, so it turns out it worked. But then after that we had to monitor the cow, because there was a certain withdrawal time for that antibiotic before this cow could go to market, so we couldn't take it to market